My brother texted me, "You're no longer part of this family. Don't ever come back." And my parents backed him up. 2 days later, I got an urgent call from my grandfather's lawyer, "Be at my office tomorrow morning." What happened next left my whole family completely stunned. "You're not part of this family anymore. Don't come back." That's the text message I got from my brother, Austin, after a 5-day trip to find peace. When I got home, they had changed all the locks and decided to kick me out of the house where I'd lived for 24 years. The most painful part was that they did this less than a month after Grandpa, the only person who truly loved me, passed away. But 2 days later, I got a call from Grandpa's lawyer. And that's when everything changed completely. Listen to me as I tell you why my family kicked me out and how I got through it. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Miller. I'm 24 years old and a logistics coordinator, making $55,000 yearly in Phoenix, Arizona. 3 months ago, I was kicked out of the house where I'd lived for 24 years. That day was a Sunday morning in early March. I had just returned home from a 5-day emotional healing trip to Sedona, a small town about a 3-hour drive from Phoenix known for its majestic red rocks and peaceful atmosphere. After my grandpa's sudden death 4 months earlier, I was completely off balance. My grandpa, Harold Miller, wasn't just my grandfather. He was the only person in my family who truly understood and loved me. When he passed away from a sudden heart attack, I felt like I'd lost my best friend. I decided to travel alone for 5 days to find peace. I needed time to process the pain of losing my grandpa so suddenly. I spent time meditating, hiking, and reflecting on life throughout the trip. At that time, I thought I had found some much-needed peace to move forward. But I had no idea that while I was seeking tranquility in Sedona, my family was planning to erase me from their lives. After 5 days of traveling in Sedona, my spirits had noticeably improved. Mornings watching the sunrise over Red Rock, afternoons hiking Cathedral Rock Trail, and especially the quiet time for reflection, all helped me feel much more at ease. Around 9 a.m. on Sunday, I arrived home. My grandpa had let my parents live in this house since they married almost 30 years ago. The house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a small backyard was where my brother Austin and I grew up, holding countless childhood memories. As we reached adulthood, when we planned to rent our places, Grandpa told us, "Just stay in that house. Don't waste money on rent. It still belongs to me, and I want the family to be close." So our family of 4, my dad Raymond, my mom Laura, Austin, and I, continued to live together in this house, and living expenses like utilities, internet, and food were split evenly for many years. Despite occasional disagreements about chores or shared spaces, we still lived harmoniously. After parking in front of the house, I quickly grabbed my travel bag from the trunk, eager to rush inside and share my exciting trip with my family. But when I approached the front door and put my key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. First, I thought I had used the wrong key. I took it out to check again. It was the familiar brass-colored front door key. I tried again, but still couldn't open it. Immediately, my heart started pounding faster. My hand trembled as I realized the lock was completely different. It was brand new, shiny, and unfamiliar. I quickly ran around the house to check the back door, but the lock there had also been replaced. I tried pushing on the windows, but they were all securely locked from the inside. When I returned to the front of the house, I noticed Austin's red Ford wasn't in the garage. Only Dad's old Toyota Camry remained. Perhaps they had gone somewhere together. Standing at the door with my suitcase, I felt like a stranger trying to break into someone else's home. A sense of unease filled my chest. My family knew today was the day I was returning, yet no one had informed me they had changed the locks. Right after that, I called my parents to ask what was happening. Maybe they'd changed the locks for security reasons and forgot to tell me. I called Dad first. The phone rang and rang, but no one picked up. Then I tried Mom. Same result. Both calls went straight to voicemail. Even though I was starting to feel uneasy, I wanted to reassure myself. Maybe they're just busy with something important. After about 5 calls to my parents, I called my brother Austin. His phone rang continuously too, and he had no answer. After 3 more calls, I put the phone down, slumping onto the house's front steps, feeling confused and worried. 5 minutes later, my phone beeped, signaling a new message. I opened it and felt like I'd been struck by lightning when I read the text from Austin. "You're not part of this family anymore. Don't come back." I sat still as a stone for a moment, staring at the phone screen. Was Austin joking with me, or did someone borrow his phone to send a malicious message? Immediately, I called Austin's number again to demand an explanation. But the phone kept ringing busy. It was clear I'd been blocked. The shock turned into confusion, then gradually into ultimate pain. 2 minutes later, my phone beeped again. This time it was a notification from the family group chat, which we'd used to discuss family matters for years. The notification displayed, "Brian Miller has been removed from the group." At this point, my heart felt like it would burst from my chest. My hands trembled as I realized this was no misunderstanding or joke. They had planned to cut me out of the family. I tried to contact my parents again, hoping they would explain everything, but still, no one picked up. Sitting on the steps of the house where I'd lived for 24 years, dry leaves blew across the front yard, and the wind bit cold through my thin t-shirt. But I was determined not to leave. Austin had no right to kick me out of this house. I would wait until my parents came home and demand that they explain the situation directly. Around 11 a.m., Austin's car turned into the driveway. I stood up from the steps, my heart pounding as the three family members exited the car. I first noticed their cold, distant expressions when they saw me. There was no surprise, no hint of guilt or confusion. They knew I'd be there and were prepared for this confrontation. As they approached the front door, I asked them, "Why did you change the locks without telling me anything?" Austin stopped, looked me in the eye, and asked, "You're still here? I thought after the text I sent, you'd understand everything." As soon as Austin finished speaking, I replied, "You have no right to kick me out. This house belongs to Grandpa." Immediately after, Dad stopped, looked at me with icy eyes, and told me in a decisive tone, "We've decided. This house belongs to Austin." During Dad's announcement, my heart felt squeezed. This man had raised me for 24 years, the man I called Dad, but now he spoke to me as if I were just a stranger begging to stay. Mom stood beside him, her gaze avoiding direct eye contact with me, her voice trembling but still trying to maintain a firm facade as she told me, "You need to be independent now, Brian. You're 24. You can't depend on family forever." Each of Mom's words felt like a knife stabbing into my heart. The woman who once helped me when I was sick, who cooked my favorite meals, was now treating me as if I were a burden the family needed to get rid of. Feeling suffocated and desperate, I threatened them. "I'll call the police. You can't just kick me out of the house like this." Hearing me mention the police, Austin spoke up in a cold voice I had never heard him use before with me. "The police won't help. Grandpa's gone. The house belongs to Mom and Dad now, and they have the right to ask you to leave within 30 days. You can stay another 30 days if you want, but you'll still have to move out after that." Austin's words were entirely accurate then. His words reminded me that if Grandpa were still alive, they would never dare to do something like this. At that moment, standing among the three people dearest to me in my life, I felt more alone than ever. The air around me felt thick, every breath becoming difficult, and I realized the painful truth that I no longer had a place in this family. They had decided to cut me out of their lives, and nothing I said or did could change that decision. Faced with their cruel decision, I didn't beg to stay. I didn't even call the police, though I threatened to, because I knew they couldn't help me anyway. More importantly, even if the law allowed me to stay for 30 days, those 30 days would be pure hell. No one would look at each other. Worse, they might do things I didn't want to imagine. Remembering what little courage I had left, I told them calmly, "Give me 3 hours to pack my things, then I'll leave." After a few seconds of silent glances, they nodded their agreement without another word. Walking into the house I'd called home for 24 years, I felt like a stranger invading someone else's private space. Everything was still the same. The familiar brown sofa, the wooden dining table where the family once gathered, the photos hanging on the walls, but the cold atmosphere made it feel strangely alien. I went straight to my room and started packing. Every item I picked up held dear memories. The book To Kill a Mockingbird that Grandpa gave me when I was 16, family photos from my childhood when we were still happy, the old laptop I'd saved up to buy. Throughout the packing process, no one in my family came to help or talk to me. Austin even stood guard at my bedroom door, as if he feared I'd steal something that didn't belong to me. His suspicious gaze made me feel humiliated. Whenever I put an item in my suitcase, I felt like I was erasing a trace of myself from this house. The room gradually became empty, as if I had never existed here. After exactly 3 hours, I dragged my 2 suitcases downstairs. No one in the family said goodbye or showed any regret. They just stood silently, watching me like a tenant leaving their property. Before stepping out the door, I turned back to look at the 3 of them, my voice cold but clear as I told them, "Remember this day. From now on, I'm done with all of you. We have no relationship anymore." No one replied after my words. I pulled my 2 suitcases, walked out the front door, and heard the lock click shut behind me. Just like that, I officially became homeless in the very city I was born and raised in. I wandered through Phoenix in my old Honda Civic that afternoon, not knowing where to go. The familiar streets suddenly felt strange, as if I were lost in a new city. Finally, as if guided by some force, I found myself at Greenwood Cemetery, where my grandpa rests. I parked near the entrance and walked to the familiar grave. The gray granite headstone, etched with Harold Miller, 1942 to 2025, stood there, a testament to the passing of the only person who truly understood me. Standing before his grave, I started telling him everything that had happened. I recounted my trip to Sedona to find peace, about coming home, and finding the locks changed. I told him about my parents' cruelty, about what happened that morning. In that cold cemetery, I was standing there, talking to myself with no one to reply. Occasionally, gentle breezes swept through the old oak trees in the cemetery, creating a soft rustling sound. Then, unexpectedly, a small robin flew from somewhere, circling me as if it understood my pain. I held out my hand, and a strange thing happened. The bird gently landed on my palm. Now and then, it pecked lightly at my palm, as if comforting me. Looking at the bird's friendliness, I felt like Grandpa was listening to me, but an absolute sense of loneliness overwhelmed me when the bird flew away. I wished he could come back to life, listen to me, and give me advice, but the reality left me desperate. As I was still standing before Grandpa's grave, a voice from behind startled me. "Brian, you're here, too?" I turned to see Uncle Thomas, my dad's younger brother, who also lived in Phoenix. He was 47, a civil engineer, with a kind demeanor and always warm towards me at family gatherings. Seeing my expression, Uncle Thomas asked with concern, "Are you here to visit Grandpa because you miss him, too?" After a few seconds of hesitation, I replied, trembling. "Partly because I miss him, partly because I have nowhere else to go." Looking at my dazed eyes and sad face, Uncle Thomas immediately knew something was wrong. Without waiting for me to say more, he sat down on the steps before Grandpa's grave and told me, "Sit down and tell me everything." Right after that, I told him what had happened that morning. I recounted my trip to Sedona, returning home to find the locks changed, Austin's cruel text, the cold confrontation with my parents, and the 3 hours I spent packing amidst hostile silence. As I recounted everything, Uncle Thomas listened silently, his face growing paler as I finished the story. Finally, he was shocked by how my parents and brother had treated me. His face filled with anger, he told me, "Raymond can't do that. I'm going there to talk to your dad right now." At his concern, I felt profoundly grateful. I immediately nodded my thanks. A few seconds later, he suggested, "Come stay at my place tonight. Don't wander around anymore." But I politely refused, telling him, "Thank you, Uncle, but I'll get a hotel near work for now. It'll be convenient to get to my job. I don't want to complicate the situation further." Hearing my decision, Uncle Thomas didn't try to persuade me further. He nodded in understanding, "Okay, but if you need anything, call me right away." Then he stood up, his eyes determined, and said, "Now I'm going to Raymond's house to sort this out. I'll contact you later." After that, Uncle Thomas left. Watching Uncle Thomas's figure disappear into the late afternoon sunlight of the cemetery, a gentle warmth seeped into my heart. After many hours of feeling abandoned by the world, I finally knew I wasn't completely alone. After he left, I returned to Grandpa's grave one last time, gently touched the cold granite headstone, and whispered, "Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll be back to visit you soon." Then I got into my car and drove towards my company. I needed to find a nearby hotel to rest and think about what to do next. An hour later, I rented a temporary room at a hotel near my logistics company. The room was small, with a single bed, a desk, and an old TV, but at least I had a place to rest. My phone rang as soon as I got into the room and set my 2 suitcases down. It was Uncle Thomas. The moment I answered, I could feel the anger in his voice. I sat down and listened as he recounted the argument that had just taken place. Uncle Thomas had gone to the house and demanded that my parents explain why they treated me this way. But my parents not only refused to listen, they reacted harshly. Uncle Thomas told me that my dad said it was his family's business and that Uncle shouldn't interfere. My mom said Austin needed the house more because he was about to start a family. What made Uncle Thomas most furious was their attitude. They showed absolutely no remorse for kicking me out. Even when Uncle told them they were wrong, they threatened to call the police if he didn't leave immediately. Ultimately, Uncle Thomas was forced to leave, but not without giving them a stern warning. He told them that what they did would have consequences. Someday they would regret today's decision. When he finished telling me, I felt both sad and grateful. Sad because I realized my parents were determined to cut ties with me without hesitation about changing their minds. But I was also very grateful to Uncle Thomas. Although the outcome of the conversation wasn't what we hoped for, the fact that he stood up for me made me feel less alone. Before ending the call, I told him, "Thank you so much for standing up for me. No matter the outcome, I'm grateful because you value me." Hearing me, Uncle Thomas sighed and replied, "Don't you worry. I'm always here if you need me." After the call, I lay on the hotel bed, looked up at the ceiling, and wondered what I would do next. That night, lying in the small, dimly lit hotel room, I couldn't sleep. My mind drifted back to Grandpa, the man who had been the only light in my life. I remembered weekend afternoons when Grandpa taught me to fix electrical things in the garage. His calloused hands always patiently guided me on holding a screwdriver and checking a circuit. He told me that being self-reliant would ensure I'd never depend on anyone. I remembered weekend mornings, Grandpa making pancakes for me when I visited. He always asked about my studies and future dreams and never compared me to Austin like Mom and Dad often did. Then I remembered the day I got the news of his passing almost a month ago. I was working at the logistics office when I got the call from Mom. Her voice trembled as she told me Grandpa had died from a sudden heart attack. Even though he was rushed to the hospital, he didn't make it. The feeling then was like someone had just pulled the ground from under my feet. At his funeral, I was the one who cried the most. Austin and my parents were sad, but they didn't show the deep sorrow I felt. Perhaps it was because they had never been as close to him as I was. Now, lying in this unfamiliar room, I realized that after my trip to Sedona, I only felt a little more peaceful, but my longing for him had never faded. He lived on in my heart through every life lesson he had taught. His words echoed in my mind. "Brian, life will be tough sometimes, but never let anyone hurt your self-respect. You have to be strong and confident in yourself." At that moment, I understood that Grandpa had prepared me with the lessons I needed to face today. Even though he was no longer with me, his love and teachings would help me get through this challenging period. In the darkness, I silently promised Grandpa I would live faithfully to what he had taught me. The next day, I went to work as usual, as if nothing had happened. During my lunch break and in the evening after work, I took the opportunity to check out some rental homes around the Phoenix area. I wanted to find a place that fit my salary, a place I could truly call home after everything that had happened. By the second day's afternoon, a phone call changed my life forever. I had just finished a meeting with the logistics team that day when an unfamiliar number appeared on my screen. It had a Phoenix area code, but I didn't recognize it. After a few seconds of hesitation, I decided to answer. The voice on the other end of the line was polite and professional. "Hello, Brian Miller. I'm Attorney Grayson, Mr. Harold Miller's lawyer." My heart started beating faster when I heard Grandpa's name. The lawyer continued, "Please be present at my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. to hear about your grandfather's will." After the lawyer's announcement, I thanked him and promised to be there on time. After hanging up, hundreds of thoughts started flooding my mind. When did Grandpa make a will? I had never heard anyone in the family mention this. Why was the lawyer calling me specifically? How was I involved in Grandpa's will? About 5 minutes later, I called Uncle Thomas to ask about it. He confirmed that he also received a notification from the lawyer that he would be present tomorrow at 9 a.m. And he was also surprised, proving that he had no prior knowledge of Grandpa making a will. Before ending the call, Uncle advised me, "You should go and see what Grandpa's will says. He might have left something for you." That evening, lying in the hotel room, I braced myself for the possibility of seeing my parents in Austin at the lawyer's office tomorrow morning. The feeling of unease and anxiety made it hard for me to sleep. I wondered how tomorrow's meeting would go and whether this might be the last chance for our family to reconcile. But deep down, I felt that tomorrow would be a day that changed everything. At exactly 8:50 a.m. the next morning, I entered Attorney Grayson's office at the address he had provided via email. The office building was in downtown Phoenix, with modern architecture and a professional atmosphere. I saw Uncle Thomas's family sitting in the corner as I entered the waiting room. Standing beside them were my parents and my brother Austin. But I wasn't surprised, because I was sure they would be here for anything related to Grandpa's assets. Austin stood up when he saw me, looking annoyed, and roared, "What are you doing here? Did Grandpa leave you something?" I didn't respond to him. Instead, I looked towards Dad, trying to keep my voice even and polite as I asked him, "Are you doing well?" They didn't reply. Dad avoided my gaze, and Mom silently looked down at the floor. Their coldness made the atmosphere in the room even more tense. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Attorney Grayson, a man in his 50s with slightly graying hair and a sharp suit, invited all of us into the conference room. He began to open the documents with a solemn expression. According to Attorney Grayson, this will was made by my grandpa on March 18, 2022, in full mental clarity, without any coercion or undue influence. After announcing the date the will was made, the lawyer began to read its contents. The first part was for Uncle Thomas's family. In the will, Uncle Thomas inherited his family's house and $400,000 from Grandpa's savings. Uncle Thomas listened silently, nodding slightly as if they had known this beforehand. After Uncle Thomas's part came the section for my family. Attorney Grayson looked at me and announced, "The current house where Raymond Miller, Linda Miller, and Austin Miller live is bequeathed by Harold Miller to Brian Miller." After that announcement, the room fell into absolute silence. I could hear my own heart pounding. A few seconds later, the lawyer continued, "Furthermore, Brian Miller inherits an additional $100,000 in cash from Harold Miller's private savings account." Then he spoke the last sentence that stunned my entire family. "Raymond Miller, Linda Miller, and Austin Miller do not inherit any other assets from this will." Immediately, my dad yelled in an angry voice, "No way. This is unfair. I'm his son. Why don't I get anything?" Right after that, Mom asked trembling why Brian, he's his grandson, why does he get a share while we, his children, get nothing? But Austin was the most furious. He shot up from his seat, slammed his hand on the table, and shouted, "This is a mistake." Then he turned to me, pointed directly at my face, and demanded loudly, "Did you manipulate Grandpa into making a will to inherit the house?" I sat silently at his question, still reeling from what I had just heard. I never thought Grandpa would leave me such significant things. Uncle Thomas and his wife remained silent, showing no surprise at the will's contents. It seemed they had known about Grandpa's decision beforehand. A moment later, Uncle Thomas looked directly at my dad and said in a cold voice, "This is the price for kicking your son out of the house, turning him homeless." Uncle's words were like a direct slap to my parents' faces. They suddenly fell silent, realizing I was the house's valid owner. In that moment, I understood that everything had changed entirely. This turning point not only reversed the power dynamic in the family, but also showed me that Grandpa had understood everyone's nature a long time ago. About 10 minutes later, once the atmosphere in the room had settled and everyone had composed themselves, Attorney Grayson continued with the next part of the will. He took out a still-sealed letter in a yellow envelope with Grandpa's familiar handwriting. The lawyer explained, this letter was written by Mr. Harold after the will was made. To clarify the reasons behind his decisions, the lawyer opened the envelope and began to read the letter's contents. In the letter, Grandpa made it clear to the family that he was not unfair to anyone and had valid reasons for this decision. Grandpa mentioned in the letter that Austin had lost $400,000 gambling at Desert Diamond Casino 4 years prior. Loan sharks threatened him, and my family came to Grandpa, begging for his help. That day, Dad, Mom, and Austin knelt in Grandpa's living room, crying and pleading for him to save Austin's life. Grandpa gave them $400,000 at that time to save Austin's life. When the lawyer read this part, the room fell into absolute silence. I was utterly shocked. I had never known about this. Now I understand why Grandpa loved and trusted me so much. In the letter, Grandpa also wrote that he knew my mom and dad always favored Austin over me. If he hadn't made the will this way sooner or later, they would have sold the house and given all the money to Austin for him to continue gambling. Hearing this, Uncle Thomas was utterly shocked. He looked at my dad with disbelief and said, "You're so greedy. Dad already gave you $400,000, and you still want more." As the truth was revealed, my dad sat in silence, his face pale, unable to argue. Austin hung his head, not daring to look at anyone. My mom burst into tears, realizing all the truth had been exposed. At that moment, I truly understood Grandpa's deep love and wisdom. He had seen the future and protected me from those he knew would take advantage of me. After all that, my parents and Austin looked at me with fear. They looked at me that way for the first time ever, no longer with contempt or coldness, but with anxiety and unease about the new power I just gained. After my parents, Austin, and Uncle Thomas's family left, I stayed behind at Attorney Grayson's office. I needed time to process all the information I just received and thoroughly understand my legal rights. I told him what happened over the past 2 days, from being kicked out of the house, Austin's cruel text, to sleeping in a hotel. After I finished, Attorney Grayson looked at me with astonishment. He couldn't believe my parents and brother could be so cruel. Under Attorney Grayson's advice, I drafted an official notice requesting them to vacate the house within 30 days. The lawyer explained that this was my legal right as the new house owner. That afternoon, I took the rest of the day off work, grabbed my luggage from the hotel, and took the notarized copy of the will. I drove back to the house. When I parked in front, I felt a strange sensation. This was still the familiar house where I'd grown up, but now I was returning as its owner. Considering the house as its legal owner, I felt a complete shift in how I perceived the space. The 3 members of my family were sitting in the living room, their faces etched with worry and unease. Immediately after, I took out the notice I had prepared and read it aloud to them. Based on the legally notarized will, I require you to vacate this house within 30 days from today. Furthermore, you must surrender all keys to the house. Immediately, my mom burst into tears and begged me, "Brian, don't kick your parents out. We're family." My dad also pleaded, "Son, I know I was wrong. I apologize for what happened." But I remained firm, looking them straight and saying, "3 days ago, what did you tell me? Remember that yourself." After my reply, Austin, silent until then, suddenly spoke pleadingly, "Brian, I'll leave as you requested. But can you lend me $100,000? Hearing that amount, I was stunned. I looked at him in surprise and asked, "What for?" After that question, Austin lowered his head, his voice trembling as he admitted, "I have a bit of a problem. A few days ago, I lost at the casino again. I borrowed $70,000 there. With interest, it's almost $100,000 now." Knowing he had gambled again, I flat out refused. I said, "You've run out of chances. Grandpa saved you once with $400,000. I won't repeat that mistake." The moment I refused, Austin suddenly became enraged. He stood up, pointed straight at my face, and yelled, "You're selfish, heartless." Not letting him say more, I immediately retorted, "Don't forget, 3 days ago, you were the one who kicked me out of the house with Mom and Dad." After that, I turned my back and went up to my room. But Austin didn't give up. That evening, he posted on the Reddit Stories family drama group, along with a photo of the 30-day notice I had given them. The post read, "My ungrateful brother Brian Miller is kicking our parents out of the house because he inherited property. After inheriting the house from Grandpa, he immediately forgot his family and is ungrateful to those who raised him since childhood. Look, this is the notice he gave our family." Austin's post quickly went viral on social media in Phoenix. He also shared it in local groups, making the story a sensation in the community. Hundreds of comments are split into 2 distinct factions. The side supporting Austin commented, "Family is most important. You can't kick your parents out for money. This brother is truly ungrateful. He forgot his family and his family was his family." But many people understood and supported me. There must be a good reason. Don't judge without knowing the truth. Maybe his family mistreated him. Within 24 hours, my name became the target of criticism on Phoenix social media. My phone constantly rang with calls from unknown numbers, and my Facebook inbox was full of abusive messages. I felt like I was living in a storm of public opinion. Standing in my room, looking out the window, I wondered if my decision was correct. After seeing Austin's post go viral and receiving hundreds of abusive messages, I decided not to let it go. I contacted Attorney Grayson and asked him to help me sue Austin for defamation and for damaging my reputation. When they learned I was preparing to sue Austin, my parents came to beg me. My mom cried, telling me, "Don't sue Austin. He's your brother." My dad also pleaded, telling me, "Brian, I'm begging you, don't hurt the family anymore." I looked them straight in the eye and said, "It's too late." Austin chose this path. 1 month later, the trial took place at the district court. Attorney Grayson had prepared ample evidence. Screenshots of Austin's posts, a list of the threatening messages I received, and proof of the reputational damage I suffered. The trial's outcome was clear. Austin was found guilty and faced the following penalties: a $1,000 fine, and he was ordered to pay me $3,000 for reputational damages. Additionally, the court issued a restraining order, meaning Austin was prohibited from contacting or approaching me for 5 years. Finally, Austin had to remove all related posts and publish a public apology on social media. But the real consequences for Austin were far more severe. Unable to pay his casino debts, the loan sharks began to hunt him down. Austin was forced to flee Phoenix, going to another city to hide. I never received the $3,000 the court had ordered, but I still felt satisfied that I had gotten justice for myself. As for my parents, after the trial, they had to vacate the house according to the notice I had sent them on the day I received the will. They became homeless, forced to live temporarily in their car. Our relatives, after learning the truth about how they had kicked me out, distanced themselves and refused to help them. This was finally served, but my entire family's price was steep. Even though my parents had left the house at my request, I kept track of their lives from afar. Through Uncle Thomas, I learned they were having a tough time, sleeping in their car and constantly looking for temporary shelter. A week ago, almost 2 months after I'd kicked them out, they returned to the house and waited outside for me to get home from work. When they saw me, my mom approached with swollen eyes and said, "Brian, can you give us one last chance?" Immediately after, my dad spoke up, his voice hoarse. He said, "Son, please, we promise to respect your space and contribute to the living expenses." Looking at the two people who had so cruelly kicked me out, now begging to come back, I felt a complex, indescribable emotion. Part of me was still angry about what they'd done, but another part felt sympathy for their current situation. After a night of thinking, I decided to give them one last chance, but I set clear conditions. They weren't to contact Austin in any way. They had to contribute to the living expenses, and most importantly, they had to respect all my decisions regarding the house. They agreed immediately. Truth be told, I had my calculations. If Austin were to return, and they betrayed me again, I would sell the house and move somewhere else, and they would once again be homeless. When news of my decision spread, the reactions from relatives were divided. Many called me a doormat for taking back people who had betrayed me. They commented, "He's too weak, they'll just take advantage of him again." But many praised my decision, saying, "That's what a compassionate person does. Knowing how to forgive is noble." He gave them a lesson, and now it's a second chance.